By 1999, online multiplayer was the go-to feature for first-person shooters. The logic is simple. People want to interact with others. They welcome the competition, the challenge, the opportunity to prove themselves. The late 90s marked the beginning of what is known as esports. This was a new industry within video gaming. Korean esports was gaining momentum with StarCraft Brood War, but esports in North America and Europe was focusing on first-person shooters. In this final game review, we'll take a look at one of the more popular games used in professional tournaments around the world. Untold centuries ago, the mysterious arena masters who call themselves the Vadrigar constructed the Arena Eternal for their own amusement. The arena is the new battleground for the greatest warriors of all time, with the sounds of carnage and agony entertaining the masses. They don't want something as trivial as death to stand in the way, so fallen warriors are revived instantly by the Vadrigar. The one who kills the most will be praised and advanced to the next arena, until finally, he or she faces Zero, Lord of the final arena. Yes, Quake III Arena had a storyline, and that's all she wrote. This game was released in December of 1999. The first thing you notice is the lack of a single-player campaign in the general sense. The game is devoid of any meaningful storyline and focuses purely on multiplayer action. It does have a single-player mode where you face off against bots and unlock increasingly more difficult opponents and arenas, but you're still playing deathmatch. Quake III Arena introduces several elements to the game that keeps the action fast-paced. The lifts and elevators from previous games have been replaced with directional jump pads. Elevators were a problem in multiplayer because when one player takes it up to a higher level, anyone left behind would have to wait for the elevator to come back down before they can use it, whereas a jump pad is always available to propel you to a higher platform. This reduced a lot of downtime from the gameplay and made it much faster. Something else you may not have noticed are the doors. They either open very quickly or they're absent altogether. Again, it's that downtime you have while you wait for a door to open. It's only a fraction of a second, but I can tell you from experience that doors or anything that stops you from moving can get you killed in that small window of time. As for the weapons, there's more of an emphasis on a handful of unique balanced weapons, as opposed to having as many cool weapons as possible. The weapon set is derived from the past Quake and Doom games. There is no single dominant weapon that you can use all game long. All of the weapons have a role they fulfill, and any split-second changes to the situation require you to change weapons often. You start with a machine gun and a gauntlet when you spawn. The plasma gun from Doom makes its return with a few tweaks. The individual plasma bolts deal a small amount of splash damage, and a delay after you stop firing was also removed. It's a good all-around weapon if you can get the shots to connect. Personally, I would rather use the lightning gun. This is derived from the Thunderbolt from the original Quake. This fires a stream of lightning up to a medium range and can kill someone very quickly. The tricky part is keeping the crosshairs on your opponent. The rocket launcher makes its return in a more balanced state. The rockets are quick enough that it's somewhat of a challenge to evade, while still being slow enough to make them less useful at a long range. This is where the Railgun comes in. This, of course, originated from Quake II. On maps with large open spaces, the Railgun tends to be overpowered. But a map with a lot of small and medium-sized rooms make the Railgun, as well as all of the other weapons, more or less useful depending on the situation. That's where the level design comes into play. The maps, as the game's title implies, consists of several arenas. The game comes with 26 maps, but I'll be honest here, most of these maps suck. The best maps are the ones the community made themselves. The good maps will have no dead ends. There will always be multiple entrances and exits into each area. They will also have a good placement of weapons and items, so there will never be any sort of holding ground where the players can simply camp and rack up the kills. DM6 and DM13 were probably the best stock maps in the game. Everything else was made by the fans. These maps also took into consideration the various tricks that players could do to navigate the map. To the naked eye, I would appear to be jumping around everywhere I go for no reason whatsoever. In reality, I'm taking advantage of rounding errors in the engine to travel across the map faster. This is called Strafe Jumping. Many of the glitches from the previous Quake games have been embraced by the players over the years because of its difficulty to exploit properly, so rather than being fixed, they were retained and the players practiced their execution of these various tricks. There were a few changes to the balance to make the game much more dynamic. The quad damage now only does 3 times the damage, yet is still called the quad damage because it's such a cool name. Body armor now only comes in yellow and red, giving the player 50 and 100 armor respectively. Both types will absorb 2/3 of the incoming damage, and the weapon spawn behaviors were changed to simply give you the weapon with adequate ammo, but you can't really camp the weapon to max out. For the players themselves, you now spawn with 125 health. This means you no longer die in one hit after you respawn. Your health and armor will decay whenever they're above 100, so you'll always be roaming the map for items to keep those numbers high. These changes made the game less lopsided and allows players to have a reasonable chance to make a comeback. When it comes to the graphics, the game places more emphasis on helping players analyze the screen quickly than on simply looking good. Playing at 60 frames per second was key, but with the CRT monitors of the time, you can go as high as 100 frames per second. The muzzle flashes from the weapons not only look cool, but it has enough transparency that it doesn't block your view of whoever you're attacking. The game also has color-coded ammunition pickups. Rather than identifying items through their shape and texture, you look at a red crate, for example, and you immediately think rockets. This may only be a few milliseconds faster, but this really does make a huge difference. On the aesthetic side of the graphics, the engine allows for curved surfaces and archways, which delivers a more realistic look to the architecture. There's always a sufficient amount of light everywhere you go. You will rarely come across a dark corner where you can hide and ambush players in. Of course, this also means more crazy moving and less camping. The graphics just look very good overall, but the problem is, you won't be paying attention to them. The focus of the game in general means the players will be too busy playing the game to appreciate the graphics. The sound effects are nothing too special. The weapons sound like they have enough power behind them to satisfy most players, but there are 2 things about the sound to take note of. The announcer voices let you know of events when you're just too busy to read anything on the screen. Events like someone approaching the frag limit. You can also hear a subtle beep every time you damage another player. This is really important for the gameplay because a shot that looks like it should hit may not necessarily connect. So knowing this gives you an opportunity to correct your aim. The music was acceptable, but not as memorable as the previous id Software games. Sonic Mayhem returns to create half of the game's soundtrack, with the other half created by Frontline Assembly. There's a techno-industrial theme to the music, but the importance of audio cues in this game may lead you to turning down the music or turning it off completely. But everything you could ever ask for was here. The graphics, the frame rates, the controls, the audio, nothing got in your way. There were no limitations to speak of, and that still applies to this day. All you had to worry about was getting those frag counts up. But if that's not enough for you, id Software released an expansion to the game called Quake III Team Arena. As the name implies, the focus is on team-based game modes, but these modes are not too great. Along with the new maps for Capture the Flag, you also have one base CTF, which requires you to bring the flag to the enemy base, Overload, where you destroy the enemy team's obelisk, and Harvester, which has you taking skulls to the enemy base. A few new weapons were thrown into the mix: the nail gun, chain gun, and proxy mine launcher. They're appropriate for the new game modes, but they interfere with the weapon balance of the regular deathmatch. You can safely ignore this expansion pack, you won't be missing much. On the console side, 2 ports have been released for the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 2. The Dreamcast port is really damn sexy. Excluding the modding, everything is there. The audio, visuals, the maps. You can even play this game online. The Dreamcast even has its own mouse and keyboard that you can use to play this. If you like the Dreamcast version more than the PC version, I will understand completely. It's a rare instance where a console port actually does a game justice. You can still play this version online to this very day. If you have a Dreamcast, I recommend this port. As for the PlayStation 2 version, the controls are sufficient enough to be playable, but the gameplay will be slower paced. You don't have the luxury of quick turns and precise aiming, so some of the key game mechanics like rocket jumping or strafe jumping will be difficult to perform properly. You may have an issue with the load times and controls for the console ports, but aside from that, the 2 consoles can run the games very well. The developers at id Software, excluding John Carmack, were getting tired of making the same shooters. They had no real direction or self-motivation to push Carmack's tech to its limits. On top of this, there were many problems outside of their power that placed them in a very tough spot. The mainstream media and protesters were out for blood after the Columbine High School massacre. Security was hired after a wave of hate mail and phone calls came to the office. Unreal Tournament was a direct competitor with Quake III Arena, not only offering more gameplay features, but was also released a week earlier. The odds were against them. Quake III Arena had only a handful of game modes, a few weapons, and a small collection of maps, but its saving grace was the refined and balanced game mechanics. According to Carmack's 1999 plan file, the game was balanced based on feedback from the best Quake and Quake II players. So while the rest of the developers wanted to create innovative gameplay and fresh new worlds to explore, Carmack was listening to the players. So how can that alone carry a game's success? Well, it's like this. Imagine a local tournament giving away $100 to the winner. Now, imagine one that gave away tens of thousands in prize money in a venue packed with spectators anxiously watching this game. Unbeknownst to most players, Quake III Arena became one of the first few games to be used in electronic sports, or esports for short. Its combination of balanced weapons and collection of glitches turned trick jumps ensured the game had the high skill ceiling required for a competitive game. The first 2 games were used for many competitions, but Quake III Arena took it to a whole new level. Even the modding capabilities catered to this with the Challenge Pro Mode Arena mod. This modifies the weapons and air controls to raise the skill ceiling even higher, and even has its own set of maps. In addition to this, there are many more elements in the game you have to think about when playing at a professional level. You have to keep track of item respawn times, so you can deny these items from your opponent. You have to memorize the layout of the maps, and understand how to gain access to every location. Even though the objective is to get the most frags, what you may not realize is that the pro level is all about controlling the map and preventing your opponent from doing what they want. So with a well-balanced game requiring enormous amounts of skill and intelligence to be competitive with, you can create a tournament that caters to both the players and spectators. Games like Quake III Arena contributed to the start of the esports industry in the West, where professional gamers could be successful in life by playing games and being good at them. Gamers like Anton Singov. He's a player from Russia, better known by the name Cooler. He's considered to be one of the best Quake players in the world, debuting as the 2002 World Cyber Games champion when he was only 15 years old. He won over $150,000 over the course of his career. Johan Quick is a pro gamer from Sweden who goes by the name Toxjq. He made his mark in the community with his results in team deathmatch. His team had several first-place finishes, many of which was from the clan-based Euro Cup. He is also known for his individual championships in Quake IV, earning over $100,000 throughout his career. Jonathan Wendel was probably the most successful American pro gamer of the time. He goes by the name Fatality. He made his debut in the 1999 CPL Frag 3 tournament, placing 3rd and taking home $4,000. Throughout his pro gaming career, he traveled the world, winning 12 championship titles across 6 different games and earning over $500,000 in prize money. He later formed business partnerships with a handful of companies to create Fatality brand computer hardware and accessories. It wasn't just the players that found success in this game, but many others involved in the community as well. 2 key personalities who got their start in this era were James Harding and Marcus Graham, better known as Too Good and djWHEAT respectively, both of whom became successful commentators and hosts for esports events. Of course, the list is much longer than this, but these were just a few of the pioneers of esports in the Western world, the ones who helped to shape the industry that we know of today. When it comes down to it, Quake III Arena offers nothing new. It lacks a conventional single-player mode, but it takes everything that made deathmatch amazing and refines it. It's all in the eye of the beholder. What defined Quake III Arena was not the game itself, but was defined by what the community did with it. While the first 2 games had a vibrant modding community, Quake III Arena paled in comparison. The game's higher requirements made it less accessible to the masses. Many of the past Quake modders had migrated to other games such as Unreal Tournament, Star Siege Tribes, StarCraft, and most notably, Half-Life. Quake III Arena had the modding capabilities, just not the people to take advantage of it. Fortunately, the base gameplay was solid enough to be used for other purposes. So take all the ratings and reviews for Quake III Arena with a grain of salt. Most people will only see this as just another game with more of the same. If you wanted to see new innovations or different types of games, there were plenty of other games to choose from. If you wanted the basic deathmatch formula, fair and balanced, with no fluff or gimmicks, this was the game to play. If you dreamt of the day when you could make a living off of playing games, Quake III Arena was one of the first few games to make this a reality. This was one of the games that helped the esports industry take off.